Chris, I think I'd like to just have you start off with a little bit of introduction and tell us about your pro wrestling career as the Maven and just a little bit of background and origin story on the Maven's Notebook.
Okay, sure. I'm Chris Austin. I publish Maven's Notebook and a couple other websites. Maven's Notebook came into existence in 2013. I've actually been doing this since 2007, if you can believe it. I started my first water news website uh, back in the time it was April 2007. And this was a time when blogs were all really something new. And it's sort of like it was going to like the wrong side of the tracks on the internet. You know, people didn't, blogs were about funny cat videos and what you're cooking for dinner, not really serious things. But I started this blog, and I did that for a while, and I ended up selling that website to another organization, and I went on to start Maven's Notebook, which was a little bit different formulation. The idea that I had for Maven's Notebook was there are so many meetings and things going on in California water that aren't really covered by the Sacramento Bee or other people. So I look for those stories, those presentations, and that's what I tend to write about on my blog. So it's not really opinion. It's not an opinion blog. It's a news blog, and and the things that I write are just covering the meetings, conferences, other things that don't usually get into the mainstream media. So,
Actually, Chris, I kind of went a little bit out of order. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to do a little bit of uh, background to people joining about sustainable Silicon Valley. And as you can see, we um, uh, to internally talk about ourselves as a think and do tank on focused on water use and reuse and air quality and mobility. Um, I just always we always do this as a preamble. As far as temperature change in California, from 1895 to close to current day, and trying to deal with the effects of that. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a lot as far as it focuses on water. Just Here's a picture of me and Jennifer Thompson, who is the executive director that runs things. And you mentioned the internet being just about cat videos and cooking, and I have to tell you that cooking the dinner part is still a very big part of the internet, for at least for me. But and because of that, we had a Giving Tuesday promotion, but now we're expanding it to Taco Tuesday. Because Giving Tuesday is once a year, but Taco Tuesday is all the time. And we did just another plug, a backward plug. Waterpalooza is in the rearview mirror, but it lives on YouTube, and you can find it at WP 2021 video off of this Tiny Earl URL. Just some breaking news, actually. Waterpalooza series, we have a corporate underwriter now. Cargill has agreed to underwrite Wet Talks, and that's very exciting news that we'll be passing along. And we have a January Wet Talk. It might be called a Cool Talk, and that's with Greg Katz and a special guest from California Policy World on smart surfaces, which are just ways to cool cities. And they involve trees, permeable pavement, green roofs, cool roofs, kind of things along that line, as well as actually there's a component within smart services about stormwater as well. And I just mentioned we have, well, we will keep up with chat, and questions are probably best in Q&A, and we probably won't be doing much polling in this event. So anyway, getting back, Chris, to getting back to you. Sorry for the commercial break in between.
No problem.
But I think, well, so we're back up. We can go to the live site, but I did want to, I pulled some pictures and of Maven's Notebook, and you know, the front page obviously is updated. I don't know how you do it, but it's updated every day, and it's full of things. I mean, including, I guess, the latest news about the state water allocations being zero, and what I originally asked you on to talk about was the resource pages and all the stuff you have compiled over the years that are where this red arrow is. And so anyway, you can take it away from here. I was intrigued with that because it's such a great educational tool.
Yeah, that's the water infrastructure page, I believe, if you were to scroll down on it. It's weird to look at my website and I can't scroll. Put out, but I put that together. It's just all on the different water systems that we have throughout the state. There's just so many of them. It's amazing how well this state is plumbed. You know, you can literally move a molecule of water from the northern border down to San Diego. That's not you know, that's not hyperbole, that's actual doable. And it's so it's quite amazing. I think there isn't any, certainly there's no state in the union, and possibly no place in the world that is more has more water infrastructure, moving water around every portion of the state than here in California. I think every river except for one or two has dams on it. I think the last river that they consider undammed is the Santa Clara River down in Southern California, and the Cosumnes River doesn't have a dam either, I believe, or not a regulating dam. Like they might have diversions, but not an actual dam. But other than that, you know, there's like over 1,200 dams in the state, at least that's what's on record. So it's like there's a hand on the way the water runs in the state. There's knobs all over the place. And I think that's what makes it so complex. You know, all the dams and all the agencies, you know, because we have state, we have federal, we have local, you know, there's just like so many agencies involved in moving water. It's just tremendous. Yes.
Yes, and speaking to that, I've just threw up a bunch of pictures. One, I think from the Bay Delta, you know, things that on the right, I think is something that you had in on the site as far as where California's water come from.
Yeah.
And, you know, this kind of illustrates a bit of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it doesn't, you know, it's just showing the figure on the left is just showing the larger water systems, but there are so many more smaller ones. But yeah, see, they have the McCollum Aqueduct on there. So they got like the largest ones, but there's so many more that distribute water. It's incredible.
Yeah, so the two largest being Hetch Hetchy and then the LA Aqueduct from I guess the Owens Valley area.
Yeah, in the regional systems. And then,
Yeah,
you know, of
red.
course, we have the Central Valley project, you know, which I think is in green on there, and the State Water Project. Yeah, and you know, you heard the big news yesterday, or you know, if you were paying attention to water news yesterday, you heard that the state, for the State Water Project, is not going to deliver any water unless we have a very different water year than how it's looking. You know, we still have, it is December 1st, and we still got, you know, 5 months to go with potential rain. So, you know, we shouldn't be throwing in the towel yet, but we also need to prepare that it's going to stay dry, because the science seems to be telling us that. And it isn't a time to go full out on your water consumption. In fact, you there in San Jose are really facing some significant water crunches, you know, a lot of things converging on y'all down there. So some tough times, you know, tough times ahead. So
yeah, and I guess we'll get into that in terms of the more current projects in a little while. The Santa Clara County is certainly has taken a lot of early actions. It has, you know, it faced reductions in a number of their sources, and they and then they have Anderson Dam. Under seismic retrofit project, which you know, is going to take years to get back online. And so yeah, they were very early on introduced kind of restrictions, and I think that's going to get tightened up as the water year goes from October 1st to into the new calendar year.
And you know, we should definitely note that, you know, the Valley Water there, your Santa Clara Valley Water Agency, you know, they've really done a good job with groundwater management. They've done a good job managing water. This is not things that's necessarily under Valley Water's control. This is hydrology. It's just bad. And, you know, what's really unique about San Jose there in that area is that you actually have connections to all the water systems. You have a State Water Project and a Central Valley Project, and some of you are getting Hetch Hetchy water, you know, plus groundwater. So I think, you know, in Southern California, that was something that Metropolitan always sort of felt protected them, was that they had water coming from all these different places. And so, you know, like we have Colorado and we have state and we have groundwater. So, you know, we're never going to get hit. You know, generally one is dry and the other is not, but now it's dry everywhere. It's just dry everywhere. So, you know, there's some, I think we're looking at some really tough times ahead if it stays dry, and that's kind of what it's looking like. So.
Yeah, and actually, by the way, when I was talking about the major red lines on the left, Hetch Hetchy, LA Aqueduct, and then I didn't mention Colorado River as well on the bottom there.
Right. The Colorado River is interesting. You know, actually, in terms of urban water supply, the Colorado River Aqueduct is not like a huge player. It's about 30% of Metropolitan's water supply in an average year. So, I mean, that's a significant portion. But in terms of the Colorado River and how much water California gets from the Colorado River, it's just a teeny amount. The majority of the water, like about 3.5 million acre feet, which is, figure the State Water Project is contracts to sell 4 million acre feet, so 3.5 million acre feet of water that goes into the Imperial Valley for farming in the Imperial Valley. It's about 1/5 of the average flow of the Colorado River that goes to the Imperial Valley, where we're eating salad. Your lettuce probably came from the Imperial Valley if you're eating salad this time of year. But it's a very large amount of water, but it's to metropolitan, its share in the overall pie is really relatively small, but it's still significant to metropolitan. So,
I actually, when you mentioned that, I was even thinking of, and this is maybe more discussion a little later on, in that some of our greens came from this company called Plenty, which grows in greens in a warehouse in South San Francisco in high vertical racks, and in a hydroponic way. But again, that points maybe to different takes and efficiencies in agriculture. There was I think this was a very good description that I pulled off your website about the major water infrastructure systems. And you mentioned the Central Valley Project, State Water Project, and some of the other things that we had here. But these are like the big water supply delivery mechanisms.
Yep. Those, definitely. It's amazing how much water moves around the state and in all these different ways in canals and such.
It's a major share of electricity use.
Substantially.
Moving the water around. I think it takes
for some of them. I mean, the Los Angeles Aqueduct, that was built back in the 1910s, and that's all gravity, and they actually have it set up and take hydropower from it, but it's all gravity all the way into the San Fernando Valley. And this behind me is the Los Angeles Aqueduct as it comes into the San Fernando Valley. And where the original aqueduct comes in, it's a little further over this way, and that is the second pipe that comes down. But it's a pretty spectacular piece of infrastructure, I think, that you see when you're leaving the San Fernando Valley and heading up north. Amazing. But yeah, they built that, and it's all gravity fed. Now the State Water Project, on the other hand, is I believe it is one of the largest users of electricity in the state, and I think the State Water Project uses more electricity than it generates, although it tries to generate as much as it can. The largest is, the water lift, the pumps at Edmonston that fling the water over the Tehachapi's. I like to call it flinging, but it's the largest water lift in the world. Oh, and I have a photo tour I posted online of the Edmonston pumping plant. So if you ever want to look at what it looks like inside this, you can search Edmonston pumping plant photo tour, and I believe it's up on the top. So it's pretty amazing thing. So yeah, it's a State Water Project is a net user of water, especially for those in Southern California.
Yeah, I guess the number that I haven't checked how recent this is, but it used to be that it was like 5 or 6% of state electricity was basically to get water over the grapevine.
Yeah, I actually think it could possibly be even more, but I don't have the number in front of me.
It's literally a big lift. So I just move along, and then maybe we can get to the website itself. Oh, this was this chart is a summation of the pictures in the previous slide, and going through all the different major kind of water delivery systems. In the Bay Area, I mean, people think of Hetch Hetchy, and that's over on the right side. That was another gravity flow design.
Yeah, yeah. Back in
By virtue of, I mean, it is a pretty brilliant piece of engineering, and
it was amazing what they could do back then in the early 1900s without GPS, without, I mean, they did the stuff, I guess, with the slide rule. I don't know. Like when they built the LA aqueduct, probably something similar happened with Hetch Hetchy. Then when they built the tunnel that goes underneath Elizabeth Lake, coming over, into the valley, they started the tunnel on either end, and they tunneled in. And when they got to the meet in the middle, they were only off by an inch.
Wow.
I mean, it just like tunneling into a mountain. Like start there. I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, that's incredible.
No, well, there in terms of those back in those days too. I mean, so much of the stuff was like brute force, and there weren't any EIRs or CEQA rules to go through. Or
no.
I mean, I'm always reminded of the Panama Canal and Teddy Roosevelt at the time saying, "Hey, we stole it fair and square," and that kind of attitude. It was. Very interesting in terms of the the epic scale of these things, and the just the reaching for the can-do kind of almost foolhardiness of the attempts, but they're very impressive looking back at it. I mean, there's a lot of pluses and minuses to just in terms of how those things were done in the day, but it is the water enterprise. I know with SFPUC is we've gone into it in some detail, and there's so much to it. I mean, if you see down in the bottom right there, and they talk about facilities. This is big I infrastructure, right? I mean, 280 miles of very large pipe, 60 miles of tunnels, 11 reservoirs. These pump stations are huge things onto themselves. And then they have a couple treatment plants that are tied to it as well. The other thing is the storage that San Pedro and some of these other areas where a lot of water is banked, because in Northern California there isn't groundwater storage is not. I mean, based with the geology there, it's not as prevalent as, say, Orange County, but there is a fair amount of storage that's built within the Hetch Hetchy system.
San Francisco does not have. I don't believe they have a lot of groundwater on the peninsula there, but they definitely do there in San Jose, and Valley Water has been managing that one for decades, and I believe that they were able to file an alternative that the state accepted to the groundwater sustainability plans that the Valley people are having to do now. So that's a sign that they have been on top of it, and they did not need to adjust their plan to the new state regs, because they're accomplishing that. So that's good. It's good news for y'all there.
And actually, Valley Water's history is interesting because they came together in the early 1900s. Concerned citizens and big landowners, farmers came together because of the subsidence in the valley from the pumping of groundwater. So this is way before Sigma or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
And so they've had this. They were formed under a kind of a stewardship guidance, because they're pretty freaked out about they were sinking like 6 feet, and so then in terms of managing watershed and usage and things, was was a founding concern.
Yeah,
And
I mean, they're on top of it, which is really great because, I think one of the hardest things that people in the, Central Valley, especially the San Joaquin Valley, have to deal with is, grapple with is the fact that they haven't managed their groundwater basins very well. And so they've got a lot of problems. And we're going to be seeing, some really hard adjustments in the San Joaquin Valley as we move through implementation of groundwater management.
Well, speaking of groundwater, this is the graphic, which is more of a hydrocycle kind of graphic about groundwater, and just pulled this again off the site, and I mean, there's circles of life, but this is the circle of water, and so we get into transpiration, and
transportation. Now that sounds pretty interesting. That's like Star Trek.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to make it otherworldly. On this world, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, all those tations, but then there's the perations, and infiltration is another one. At the bottom, is the groundwater aspect, and I think this actually fast forwards to much more current stuff as far as the idea of multi-benefit land repurposing, and dealing with, I mean, there's all these issues. I mean, perhaps if you could give us the 60-second kind of California groundwater issues from
60 seconds or 60
subsidence
minutes
to maybe multi-benefit land repurposing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. The state is starting this new program that's going to help out with SGMA. The implementation of sustainable groundwater management is really affecting the Central Valley. I think to a certain extent the Salinas and Monterey area. The idea is that under the new legislation, the SGMA legislation passed in 2014, groundwater basins need to be managed sustainably, which kind of means, kind of what you put in and what you take out kind of need to balance out over time. They've given, they required everybody to form local agencies called groundwater sustainability agencies, and then they had to write up plans on how they were going to manage their basin sustainably. And those plans are all due now on in January. I believe it's January 31st of 2022. We had the most critically overdrafted basins had to turn in their plans 2 years ago. And now it's everybody's turn to be submitting their plan. So it's going to be really tough because groundwater use in the San Joaquin Valley has been estimated that they have been overdrafting the groundwater basins by at least 1 million feet a year. It depends on who's doing the estimating, but it's substantial, and it's been going on for a long time, and it's caused a lot of things like subsidence. Another story that was out earlier this week was the state is putting up some funding to rehabilitate water conveyance systems because they have been they've been impacted by subsidence. You hear a lot about the Friant Kern Canal being impacted by subsidence, but it also is affecting the California Aqueduct and some other canals, the Delta Mendota Canal too. And what happens when the land sinks and the canal sinks, then it can't move water as efficiently, and it actually pools in certain places. So that's also affecting the ability for the projects to move water when they have water to move. So so land subsidence is the big thing. And what this means, the only way to solve the groundwater basins being out of balance is either you have to get more water or you have to pump less water. So if you want water to recharge your groundwater basin, I think the hard reality is that there isn't a lot of water around to do that. So maybe it's time to call in the unicorns with the rainbow horns to go around the landscape and refill the reservoirs. But if we can't get those rainbow horn unicorns in, then the only option is there's going to have to be less pumping. And less pumping means less acres being farmed. And you just can't take a land out of production that you're farming on. You just can't turn your back and walk away, because it's going to become problematic in terms of dust, in terms of pests. You need to do something with the land that you're going to fallow. So another program that the state is spinning up, this one's going to be from the Department of Conservation. They have $100 million to kind of work on repurposing some of this land that's coming out of production. And, I think what people are hoping to do with this effort is to figure out how to fallow land in a way that makes sense. If we have just random fields being fallowed across the landscape, little postage stamps of fallow land in amongst the land that's still being farmed, that's not going to work very well. It's going to be problematic and hard to maintain those lands. But maybe if you fallow land and you pick one area and you fallow it in larger areas, then you can do something with that land. Maybe that land can become habitat. Or solar farm, perhaps. They're kind of trying to get ideas for how they can retire this land in a way that makes sense, and in a way that provides an income, perhaps, to landowners. Now, I don't know, how pie in the sky that is, because some of this land that's going to get fallowed was land that probably shouldn't have never been turned into farmland in the first place. And it didn't have much, let's just say it didn't have much value in terms of habitat or, other potential before it got farmed. So it's not likely to be anything more than that if it gets returned to fallow. So, it's going to be hard to, this is going to be really hard for people in the valley, land coming out of production, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, actually, wanted to point out that we had at Waterpalooza, we did have Ann Hayden from Environmental Defense Fund, who wrote a lot of the multi-benefit land repurposing on to kind of talk about that, as well as and again that's on YouTube, as well as Aaron Fukuda from Tulare Irrigation District, who we had a very interesting panel on say the economics of water, looking at the water markets and just kind of dealing, like how even Aaron was able to give kind of even something of a farmer's perspective as far as how they need to balance things these days, and how actually complicated it is being a farmer these days. Just even dealing with essentially the various commodities and the inputs and outputs involved in farming. I mean, you have to seem to be a jack of many trades.
And they do. They complain about this a lot, and I don't think they're just blowing wind. That's a lot of regulation, a lot of reports and plans, which they're needed. They're there for a reason, like especially in terms of trying to deal with nitrogen or nitrates in the aquifers. You now have, you have a need to have a nutrient management plan, and I mean I think it's hard. I think it is truthfully hard to be a farmer where you just don't go out with your tractor in the field. You have a lot of reporting and a lot of stuff you need to do alongside, a lot of paperwork. So it is a lot, but those regulations exist there for a reason, because there are problems. So I don't mean to, trivialize that, but they do have a lot of reports and things. So I think alignment of regulation is going to be, something that they're going to need to move forward with a little bit, in terms of water.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in this budget, it was a $50 million program for land repurposing and things, and hopefully, that isn't a short-term kind of thing, that kind of gets extended, because I think everyone agrees that farming is going to get harder.
Oh yeah.
And land use decisions are going to get tougher. And so at least this has a little bit of funding. It's to start that kind of thinking,
and to find ways to make it, find ways to use that land. Now, what's interesting is that what comes to mind is I am working on a presentation at the Delta Stewardship Council last month, and it was on deep carbon capture. Apparently, this is coming from the guys at Lawrence Livermore Lab, I believe. They've been looking at this, and apparently the Delta and the Central Valley have this sort of perfect, ideal geology to do deep carbon dioxide injection. Now, this is not like they've talked about wetlands and how wetlands can bring in carbon. Yeah. This is different. I mean, that's still valid, but this is actually injecting carbon dioxide deep down beneath the groundwater, way down into the rock. And apparently what you need is the kind of geology where there's space in the rock for the carbon dioxide to go, right? Because some geology has space like that. And the Central Valley and the Delta, he says, are just ideal, and that there is a way that they think they can monetize this because, responding to climate change. And now the one part that I never really heard in this presentation, and if I were there live, I would have to raise my hand, like, how do you get the carbon dioxide, that you're going to inject? I mean, I got the idea. You got a well, it goes down deep. You're going to put the carbon dioxide in and go down. But how do you collect that carbon dioxide? What does that look like? I mean, they did not say. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is there could potentially be this deep carbon capture idea that could be a way to monetize the use of the land. It would be like a well, it would not have a huge footprint on top of the land, but it would be one possibility. So it'll be interesting to see, what ideas come up. Certainly solar power is another one. You could certainly have more solar farms. Westlands has been doing a lot of that because I think they have land that's impacted by salinity. So they've been putting up solar farms.
We've been fascinated lately by agrivoltaics, and there's been a lot of just recently articles and studies about planting between solar panels and using the shade of the panels in good, in smart ways, in terms of planting crops that like partial shade. And there's panels. If you have a row of panels in a field but you have them spaced so you can run a tractor between them, you can grow a lot of stuff. And so it seems like it's and this is kind of counter to what was originally thought with using solar panels on land. That you wouldn't get any kind of farming benefit out of it. And so apparently now there's a lot, there's thinking that yes, you can. And, if things are done in different ways and has spawned this new phrase, agrivoltaics. So that's something that looks quite interesting. And I locally, I've even sent emails to I noticed at the local community college to me is Kenyatta College, and they have a pretty sized field of panels, and I was asking if perhaps they could grow some stuff between the panels, get their I don't know if they don't really have an agriculture school, but they have coursework that is involved in planting and things. So just even as a demonstration, they could do something more with that land and get multi-use and multi-benefit from it. I didn't want to. We talked a little bit about the Delta, and unfortunately about the beginner's guide to the Delta.
I know.
But and so I had this picture up, and I wondered if you could again do a 60-second Delta. This is involved one of the pages about the various planning efforts involving the Delta.
Yeah, then 60 seconds for the
I know,
Delta.
Just
this
a
is
quick,
kind of impossible. Yeah, the Delta, sort of all that stuff in the middle, sort of the people like to refer to it as the water infrastructure hub of California. Yeah, most of the runoff goes through the Delta. It's got some ecosystem problems. It's got water quality problems. It's really hard to talk about the Delta in 60 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
I love the Delta. It's a fascinating place to go driving around. Make sure you take a full tank of gas. It used to be that, Google Maps couldn't show you anything in the Delta. Now I think it shows you a little bit more. So,
well, there's a strong smuggling tradition in the Delta, which should clue you in on the nooks and crannies involved.
There actually, if you're on the front page and you go down at in the sections, there is a little ad strip that says, like, take a photo tour of the Delta. Are you on? Is that the
this
live?
Is the,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scroll down. One more. It's right there. See in the middle now. What is this place?
What is this place called? The Delta.
Yeah. I did this with KCET.
Oh, right. Yeah. With KCET.
And I think this is the most concise way that I've had that I put together the information on the Delta. The Delta is it's if you haven't, if you're there in the Silicon Valley, you're there in the Bay Area and you haven't driven to the Delta, you should drive through the Delta. I think the Northern Delta is more scenic than the Southern Delta. There's like wineries and things in the Northern Delta. So like if you were to get on the 4 and, go over, don't go to Martinez, go, into Rio Vista and drive through there. Mm-hmm. It's a really beautiful drive.
Rio Vista, by the way, grows most of the endive consumed
Yeah.
in the United States, Belgian endive.
Yeah, which apparently has to be grown in complete darkness, or
Right.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's indoors in a building that's pitch black, very high because they do it on kind of flats, 30 feet
Yeah.
up in the air. And I had a memorable tour of that, because I was consulting about their cooling systems because they need to keep it, they need to basically
Right.
approximate a root cellar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so that's one of the subterranean attractions to Rio Vista. Yeah, this kind of thing. I mean, this almost looks like arteries and veins, and I think that's if and you'd almost make the analogy that the delta is the beating heart of California water, and
Yeah. In a
it
way,
almost looks like it.
yeah, in a way it is. And like you're looking at this picture and you can see the channels on the right hand side, and you may say, wow, that looks like a lot of channels. But I mean, it used to have so much more. It wasn't so straightened and connected as it was. There were lots of dead end channels. I mean, in the early 1900s, it was challenging to get through there because you could go into sloughs that go nowhere. So
Yeah, and it's still it's amazing, a maze.
yeah, I really enjoy the Delta, and now that I'm up here a little closer, I hope to be able to go through it, especially in the springtime. It's really wonderful in the spring.
Yeah, so this is off the site and is just very interesting in terms of the richness there. I mean, it's something, you talk about flyover country or something. This is like drive-by country in a way, but it's worth exploring on its own, especially if you get to be in a boat in the water, because it's you can navigate well, you can get lost, but so hopefully you have a good guide. But
Yes, yeah, you need a good map, but it's kind of like, if you ski, right? And was for me, went back in my skiing days, it was so much fun to go to Heavenly Valley because it was so vast and there were ski trails all over the place. You would just, figure out how to go wherever. It was, and the Delta's like that for boats. It's like if you
yeah,
want to tool around and you want to be able to go all sorts of different places, you need a good map. There's not a lot of signs in the Delta, to tell you where to go necessarily by boat. But yeah, it must be great fun for boating. I've been out on a boat. See, I like to take pictures, and I found that, being out on a boat, all the pictures start to look, stunningly the same. This water
yeah.
shoreline. So I like to drive because I like to take pictures and I like to be able to stop and frame my shot and all that.
Yeah, no, a very kind of worthwhile thing, but then also very important for this system of water. I was just going back to these things, and really we have this up because there's always a lot of planning efforts, and these are like the three major ones as far as the Delta, and most recently the Bay Delta plan has been
Yeah, here we go.
going through iterations and
Well, now we're going to be really
lawsuits.
getting into now we're really going to be getting into the nitty gritty. It was back at the end of the Brown administration that they started this process called the Voluntary Agreements, because the State Water Board is updating their water quality plan for the Delta. And so they started with the San Joaquin Riverside, and the number of how much flow they wanted in the river to be left in the river, substantially more than what's in there now, set off a bunch of lawsuits. So they wanted to do get everybody together and do some type of agreement, to be able to, do more for the ecosystem than, than what the state water board was planning. I think the goal was, well, not all that water, but we'll put in some other habitat stuff or whatever. So they've been working on this voluntary agreement since the end of the Brown administration. Actually, I think it was in the last year of the Brown administration. And then the new Newsom came in and he changed some members on the board, and not much really seemed to happen in terms of the state water board going through with its process, because they were all waiting for these voluntary agreements. And here, but 2-3 years in now, they finally said that on the San Joaquin side, they're not going to try and do this voluntary agreement. The state water board is going to go towards implementation. Now, this is important for you all in the Bay Area, because this is going to affect the Hetch Hetchy water system that, there.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of discussion about this. For instance, water levels, because one thing with the Bay Delta Plan is about water, the amount of water that has to be left in rivers like the Tuolumne.
Right.
Because, if everybody aggressively takes their share year after year, I mean, we have a history of this where, where there's been, it's been way under its minimum level of subsistence. And then one year was a rainy year, and then, basically there was a big release of water, but it, so it was very low, and then suddenly a deluge, and then back to low. And so they're looking for some consistency, minimal level of water, in the rivers. And then, then obviously you have to deal with with that, because it's some inconvenient fact. Is that in your background? Okay.
Not in mine.
Okay. All right. I'll see what I can find out here. Found it.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, this is an ongoing process. I mean, you mentioned some work with the Delta Stewardship Council, as well, but it's not quite settled. Obviously, voluntary agreements. I mean, some people have said, it's all carrots, no stick, and I think it gets you to a certain point, and then there is probably going to be need for some stick. There was the other thing you actually didn't mention, but I was thinking when you were talking, was there was this recall. And that had a chilling effect, I think, on the Delta Plan, because, just from a realistic standpoint, if, a governor's office is not going to want to get anybody mad. And whatever they did in the Delta Plan would get somebody mad, whether, it was environmental groups trying to keep more water in the river, farmers groups. I mean, any way they move is, there is a zero-sum aspect to this, but I think in a way it's weird, because there's a zero-sum, but then there's room for, flexibility and innovation. I think there can be some, like, for instance, I've been fascinated with I think it was the 2012 agreement that never happened between SFPUC and the Modesto Irrigation District for basically a water insurance policy, where SFPUC at the time would pay if they need to draw water from Modesto or get a transfer of water from Modesto in a dry year, which they figure would be, well, they were going to pay $700 an acre foot for a given amount of water for the right to draw it. So if they were figuring that it'd be done once every 5 years. So they were essentially agreeing to pay $3,500 an acre foot as an insurance plan. And in I guess it was 2012, it did not, it was very unpopular within the Modesto irrigation district. The farmers, basically got the pitchforks out and the torches, and basically said water can't leave the district, not really recognizing the reality of the Tuolumne River, but which water leaves the district every second. But anyway, it was one of those deals that never happened. And there's been some interesting studies on it as well, because something like that might come up again.
Yeah, we're getting into some really tough, dry times, no doubt. And I think, we're going to be faced with some serious questions.
Yeah, and I mentioned here there was you have an area where you talk about California water law, and point to some websites that get into it. It's water law, but it can be a dry topic. But obviously, it's very important as far as it's a whole delta in itself as far as water law.
That article is really well written, and it's written for regular people, not lawyers. So it really explains the water stuff, the water law stuff, really, really well. I recommend it.
Yeah. I just we will get into. By the way, folks, if you want to have questions for Chris, the best place is the Q&A. I see there's a post there, but we'll get to those in just a minute. And another part of your site gets into kind of the building of a diverse water supply, kind of a portfolio. I talked about the kind of a toolbox, and one of the things was agriculture water use efficiency. And obviously there's been a lot of focus on urban efficiency.
Oh, but they've been really focusing in on ag water efficiency. That's been, farmers are business people. And as, water gets more expensive, they have been working to use it better. And they have actually invested billions of dollars in micro drip systems and other things. Yes, there are areas, in farms and operations that can do better, certainly, but I think we should recognize that a great deal of this has already been occurring in the San Joaquin Valley. And I think it's also important to note that sometimes flood irrigation is needed, it's necessary, it's the right thing for that crop at that time. For instance, if you may have seeds, and so you may flood the seeds until they sprout, to get the water in the ground, and then you lay sprinklers over the top and go with sprinklers. Sometimes overhead irrigation, sprinkler irrigation is what's right for the crop. It's not going to work on drip irrigation. So not everything can be drip irrigated. It just depends on the type of crop. So, that part,
I think we're in a situation of very much mixed bag. I mean, there is the flood irrigation,
and in general, it can be considered wasteful. However, the other part about it is that flood irrigation also then recharges the groundwater to a certain extent, that it infiltrates down into the aquifer. So when they started, like, it was a lot of focus on lining irrigation canals. And I think it was, Merced Irrigation District that pointed out, well, we don't line our irrigation canals because that's a source of recharge to our groundwater aquifer, right? So they run their, surface water out, and that recharges their groundwater basin. And, sometimes in those inefficiencies are things that, have sort of been useful in other ways, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think there's, when I was saying a mixed bag, I mean, there's, say, traditional, kind of farming as usual, but that also includes growing cotton in the Imperial Valley and, doing a lot of...
I'm not sure they grow cotton in the Imperial Valley, but I do know that they grow it in the Central Valley. And what I always thought was interesting about...
They do grow it in the Imperial Valley.
Oh, okay. I hadn't
against
seen it
all odds. And there's a certain senator from the state that has
interesting. I hadn't noticed it down there, but
yeah,
I do know.
That's Colorado River water, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, so there's examples like that, where you're asking. So the questions need to be asked is like, what are you doing?
Well, let me ask, but then there's this other little thing about cotton. I mean, yes, I agree. You're growing cotton in the desert. However, at least I don't know about the Imperial Valley, but I know about the Central Valley, and I had actually seen studies where it said this, that the crop yield on an acre of cotton out of the Central Valley is twice as much as what's grown in other areas, like, say, Georgia, traditional cotton growing areas. So, it's wasteful to grow cotton in the desert, but yet the yield is twice as much as grown elsewhere. It's why I think, there's so much to this water stuff. It's just not a simple answer. There's all these different, juxtapositions on things.
No, certainly. And I that's the kind of the questioning of everything, because we talk about maybe drip not being appropriate, but there's also a scale, right? Where it's not, it certainly hasn't scaled to where it's appropriate fully.
Oh, yeah.
And same, yeah. So it is a matter of, that kind of questioning, it's an interesting time. Let's put it that way.
Most definitely.
Yeah. And, in terms of urban water use efficiency, I mean, that can be pretty commendable, but it's also a very small amount of the actual water usage.
Overall, in the overall picture.
I mean, so agriculture is really the biggest area, and to the extent that can be, that we can start taking a look at things. I mean, if I'm sure there's many kind of traditional ways where, they make sense and hold up under scrutiny and things. And there's also, I think, a lot of room for innovation, in this area. And there's,
and there's a lot
as you say, it's getting drier.
And there's a lot of really interesting things going on, especially now with this open ET platform, this open evapotranspiration, where they're going to be able to start, remote sensing things like water use, so then, because one of the things that the Sigma agencies have been, one of the things that some of them are concerned about is the cost of putting meters on all these groundwater pumps and maintaining all those meters and making sure that they're not messed with, and over potentially thousands of wells in a particular basin. So the idea of being able to go from remote sensing and to just be able to get that information is really amazing.
Well, there's always been a lot of talk in previous, even the previous drought cycle, about like basically Sacramento did not have residential meters, or
and they've been and I think that most of the meters have been installed now. Although there was
that's been a long process, but that seems like it's getting to the point. I mean, the classic, you can't measure what you can't.
Right.
You can't manage what you can't measure.
and Sacramento is another region where the water managers have been working together for a long time, and they're working on they started addressing their groundwater problems a decade or two ago, and although they still have their issues, they've gotten together through this water forum process, and they've really, I think there's quite a number of water agencies and water districts in the region that make up this water forum, but they, they're working together to, on their problems. There was a few years ago, back in the 2014 drought, Folsom Lake was really, really low. And so like some of the agencies that drew from Folsom Lake, they wouldn't be able to draw water. So they ran a pipeline up to that water agency, put, water in their system. And they had developed a contingency plan if it ever got that bad. So, it's really helps when everybody in the region is already talking when you have to face something like that, because they're like, oh, okay, this is bad, but hey, look, we have this plan, we're ready to go, rather than walking into the room, introducing yourself and trying to figure out how you're going to deal with this really bad situation. So, Sacramento is another place where their water managers really come together to work on things.
So I wanted to get to a question, audience question. This is from Carol D. Benedetto, and talking about reading Mac Arick's book, The Dreamt Land, Chasing Water and Dust Across California. Dust being a big thing, Salton Sea. But anyway, finding it to be an excellent education about our history of water systems and policies in California, would you please address your thoughts regarding the sustainability of the idea of, quote, chasing water, unquote, versus using water more sustainably and in a nature-based way?
Yeah, I think Mark Arick's book is the Cadillac Desert book of this generation. I haven't had a chance to read it. I'm trying to. I've heard it, the reviews, but yeah, it's definitely worth the read. I wish hopefully over the holidays, I might get some reading time. Yeah, I think we have to stop thinking about looking far away for water, all the atmospheric rivers, in case you haven't noticed, we haven't really talked about this much, but they've all been swinging north, and they're all in Oregon and Washington and British Columbia, and they're actually have like so much water, they're flooding in there. So how long do you think it's going to be before someone says, we should build a pipeline from Oregon, right? Bring the water down here. I think we need to stop thinking in that way, because it's just large scale, basin to basin transfers were how we did things in the last century, but I just don't think we're going to be able to do that going forward. I think we have to work with what we have. I think nature-based solutions, look to what they're working on in the Bay Area to address sea level rise. You can build a wall, but that doesn't stop the water. So they're looking at all these various different ways, marshes, and they have these what they call ecotone levees now that they put in, so it gives a place for the water to go and for the critters to go. And if we care about these places, we need to start figuring out how we're going to adapt to something like that. I think, definitely nature, nature-based solutions are the way to go. We've been fighting nature for so long. I think the reality is, though, that in terms of the systems that we have in place, I think we have to accept that they allow our populations to live where they live. So, like, we can't disassemble the State Water Project, unfortunately. Maybe we would like to, but I think that would be very difficult because, Southern California exists because we brought the water in. The Bay Area exists because you brought the water in. And I think so I think we just have to accept that that's part of what makes our life here possible. But we certainly, on the flip side, we certainly can be doing much better. And when you work with nature rather than against nature, it really generally tends to be cheaper and less impactful.
Yeah, and actually, another Waterpalooza plug. We had an extensive talk about horizontal levees as a shovel-ready project for infrastructure money. So especially in terms of the bay, around the bay, and the needs of the bay. The active filtering that actually can happen in a horizontal levee is pretty extraordinary. Just even filtering out like metals and things before the water gets into the bay. That was that particular session is quite interesting, from David Sedlak of Berkeley.
Yes.
Yeah, who knows a thing
really
or two.
Smart guy.
Smart. I mean, the biggest problem with him is we had a conversation where we had to pick essentially one area of focus, and we did the horizontal levees because of the infrastructure money and money for bay restoration and things, and in a way it's a golden oldie for him, but it's very important to actually implement and construct, and just where green infrastructure gets a look at, as opposed to the traditional concrete gray infrastructure.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to just go through quickly a few things from the chat. One was a comment about the cotton and about higher yields at the expense of communities. Higher yields are good compared to Georgia and everything, but if communities, if it's taking water from communities that need water, and this gets into the right for water,
it's really tough.
In a way, it doesn't. The point being, it lower yields would be fine if natural water supply can sustain it. So it becomes a water choice issue, I suppose.
It really, it really is. And these are, there's so many choices, I guess, where are you going to put things? I mean, there are no easy answers. The other thing about cotton is that traditional practices dump a lot of really gnarly insecticides and pesticides on it, right? And that's an issue. But see, I got into the cotton thing because I went on a tour, the Sustainable Cotton Tour. I don't know if they're still around, but they were their thing was growing cotton in a better way. And so we went out to some farms in the San Joaquin Valley where they were growing cotton without the pesticides. They were showing us they have bugs, you know, they had like buffer zones to catch the bugs, and they would, you know, release bugs for other bugs. You know, they were do things in very natural ways. And the farmers were just giddy about this. They were actually growing colored cotton bolls too. Yeah, so they had green and they had brown, and you know, so
well,
you
crop
know,
choice gets to be a real question, you know, with farming. I mean, you know, there was a lot of new almond trees planted that got pulled up, and you know, so there is an issue in terms of crops, whether they're you know, what kind of crops, trees versus, you know, plants, and then different specimens. I mean, you know, the largest private water rights holder in California grows a lot of pomegranate.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you know, I mean, so there's a lot of issues. It is funny, as you say. You know, it used to be that whiskey's whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over, but it's also for, as you mentioned, you know, like there's so many of these issues for talking over, which I suppose keeps us in business. But you know, it's certainly true. And so just some other comments here about, well, there's a request about water issues in the West. You know, even expanding the thing. I mean, if California isn't complicated enough, there's a thing about water in the West. I'll just go through them and then you can pick and choose
okay,
what you
sure.
want. Water issues in the West, issues of water used for bottling and sending to other locations. You know, this is more the yeah,
Yeah,
the
bottled
issue
water,
of, you know, the stream, the mountain streams and pure mountain streams, and then put it in plastic.
well,
And
I'll tell you, I am not a fan of bottled water. I do think that it has its place in some instances, you know, when you know, if you're out on the road and you're thirsty, maybe you want a bottle of water. But see, I have one of these hydro flasks. See, I carry that with me. Yeah, exactly. I taught my kids, I bought refillable bottles. And so when they went to soccer, it was they you had to get your water from the house, and we took it in our refillable bottles. I mean, we don't need, if you don't like the water taste at your house, and we weren't fans of it, we got a reverse osmosis system. I mean, I just I'm not a fan of bottled water. And I think it's really sad when, like, they wanted to put in a crystal geyser plant up at Mount Shasta, and I think that the locals were successful in fighting that. I mean, that's, you don't want to see your water bottled. Like in Fiji water, why are we having bottled water?
I never quite understood Fiji water,
Okay,
but
no,
as a matter of fact, I remember having a meeting one time. I was involved in a startup, and we had some initial meetings and with a VC, and they gave us, while we're waiting, they gave us Fiji water bottles. And we were like looking at each other like, do we leave right now or what? I mean, this is such a bad idea.
I did a panel once down here in Southern California on water, and it was a new group. They hadn't really done any water events, so they're starting out a water event. And I'm sure they must have called up a supplier, and they donated these things. So I'm in a water event on a panel, and we are down in the west side of LA, like close to Santa Monica. And so I got there's like some people in sweatpants and Birkenstocks and, you know, that kind of stuff. You kind of get the idea. So they say it's break time. You go out there. And what do they have? They have bottled glacier water from Norway in glass bottles. Like, and you should have seen, people are like, oh! You know, the guys in sweatpants and Birkenstocks just going, oh my God, glass bottled water from Norway.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, holy cow. Talk about wasteful. Yeah, I can't.
So,
yeah.
Well, actually, let's move from wasteful to scarcity. You had thrown out a few kind of questions on your own or areas to talk about. And we're kind of getting well, actually, before we do that, I do want to go down two things and make little commercial here. 'Tis the season, and we've been trying to kind of co-promote this. Folks, as far as Mavens Notebook, it is
I'm reader
a
supported.
labor of love, if nothing else. And we made a tiny URL for it. Water is a gift. And if you use this, you can find out, you can get into this on the website for donation to Maven's Notebook. So
and if you're a donor, then you get my weekly water blast, my Monday morning email, which has all the events that are coming up. And sometimes you get to see things before other people on the website do, like the voluntary agreements. I follow those a lot.
So and just in our the end of our time here, I just you sketched out 3 areas, and again we can spend a half hour on each one here.
We certainly could.
And I think the Marin water comes with a chart or graph or graphic.
Yeah, I think they're talking about building a permanent pipeline across the San Rafael Bridge, and this is how the water would get there, which I think is just this fascinating little arrows going all over the place. But, I mean, here is an interesting question. So they want to build a permanent pipeline across the Richmond Bridge. And so the directors are trying to figure out, well, how are you going to operate it? And, some of the directors say, if we're going to pay for this thing, then let's put water in it. Let's go. And other directors are going, they don't want to see the district give up on their water efficiency and water conservation goals. And it really seems like, for the most part, Marin has been able to live on the water that it gets from Mother Nature, except in the very driest of years. The one thing that I will say about, Marin is that they're not building subdivisions, by the numerous, right? In fact, they don't want to build anything, quite honestly. They have to build, they have this mandate from the state to build affordable housing, and they don't want to do it. So you can't really accuse them of, runaway development. But they do have a tough time in drought years like this. So if they build this pipeline, how the rules on how they're going to use it is, is a real issue. And, Cynthia Kohler, who is also with the Water Now Alliance, really doesn't want to see Marin give up on all of the water conservation stuff. I think it's it would be, I think it's human nature in a sense, if, like now they're conscious that they need to be careful. Well, okay, put it this way, speaking somewhat from a personal experience in terms of power. When we were in Southern California, our power bill was very, very high, right? So we were very conscious about, trying to minimize it. And now in our new house, we have a crap load of solar. And I can already see, we have solar that more than covers our use during the day. So there's not a lot of pressure to be too concerned about the electrical usage. So I think there's something to be said about that. If all of a sudden now you're going to have plenty of water, it drifts to the back of the consciousness, especially when so many other things can push forward, like pandemic and other stuff. So it's a hard question. And it's a thing that they ask about the tunnels too. They say, oh, well, you build that big conveyance facility, then for sure. How are you going to tell us that you're not going to use more pump it more when you want to. So
Yeah, you certainly build something. There's always going to be pressure to use it. The no, the well, the Marin uh, decisions are. I mean, I think, especially in light of this current drought and the prospects for the coming year, there's they'll build that pipeline. I mean, but then the problem is, what do you fill it with? And
well,
that is
they're
the much harder issue.
well,
And
perhaps, but it looks like they're getting a deal with Yuba Water, at least for water
yeah,
this year.
right,
Um,
right.
and if you have money, you can get water. You know,
Yeah. But
I
I mean,
think people
also
are.
the range of decisions was, they were looking at renting desal units, and, a number of things. And I think certainly this year they were running into problems with, lack of water, Mendocino area certainly was as well. And I mean, they were pretty much trucking water to different places. And
Yeah, Porterville was not the poster child for the drought this time. It actually turned out to be the Russian River.
yeah,
Um, you
so
know,
it probably makes sense to have some kind of a pipeline, because like a lot of areas, I mean, Monterey Peninsula, another one where it's just the Carmel River. They don't have any connection because of the mountains to state water project or federal.
yeah, that's
So
another area of the
I know we can do a whole
tough
thing there,
water. Yeah, and
but
there really is no easy answers to these things. I mean, one of the things I put up there was the town of Rosamond, which is out in the far eastern side of the Antelope Valley. Now, down here we debate, well, is Southern California desert? And people, no, it's not a desert. It's just arid, right? Well, no one would debate that about Rosamond. It's a desert. It is a desert. And I kind of looked up, they got a population of about 20,000 people. The median income is about $61,000 a year, 17% of the population living below the poverty line. It's a very hard scrabble town. And the Antelope Valley groundwater basin was adjudicated. And so they have a limited amount of water that they can pump to supply the city, and it's
yeah.
not enough. So they're looking now at a farming operation on the outskirts of town, and they are considering filing eminent domain for those water rights to take the water rights for the city. So and here we go. This is really a hard
Mhm.
problem. You take the water from the farm won't can't stay in business. The value of that farmland would pretty much plummet.
Mhm.
Um, and that would not be a good thing. I wouldn't want to be that farmer. On the other hand, you have this town where these people live. The people that own houses there, they're not rich. Your house is generally the largest investment that you could ever have, the largest thing you put money into, and you dry up this town. It's going to impact all those people. So what's the right thing to do? There's just not enough water in that valley. They
Mhm.
had to divide it up. I don't know what the right thing is to do. I'm just glad I don't have to make that decision. I'll tell you
Yeah,
that
that's
much,
something though that we'll have to keep an eye on. I
I
mean,
think we're
kind
going
of
to
the
see
eminent
that.
domain aspect versus water
I
rights is.
and I think we're going to see that as we get more and more into groundwater management, and these plans, come in, and you have to bring your groundwater basin into balance. That's going to be, a lot of hard decisions. And I don't know if everyone will be able to, be made whole. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I don't know what you do out there in Rosamond. They can't bring any water in. There's no river. They're far away from the aqueduct. They're really way out there.
Yeah, that looks like tough area. I mean, there's not even, if there's not even brackish water or anything, to work with, it's tough. You need to. So Chris, I'd like to thank you very much for spending time with us and sketching these things out. And just as a reminder about the many many aspects of the Mavens Notebook, and we put, by the way, the Water is a Gift URL in the chat, and I would, just the people that are on are very, you're interested in water, obviously, and this is a great source for information. And so once again, thank you. And there's the Water is a Gift comes up.
There you go. Yeah.
And yeah, good timing. And so thanks for being part of the Wet Talk. We'll be putting out a thing about the video we post up. I'll try to get that up very soon.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun. It's always great to talk about these things.
It sure is. I'll have to have some whiskey in commemoration.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, if I had a gavel, I would hit it and conclude this time. But there's no shortage of issues, and so I'm sure we'll talk again.
Okay.
And it's funny. I keep looking at your background, and thinking make a great water park or something,
I know it.
What a slide!
Cool. I know. This is one of my favorite pieces of infrastructure, just because it's so fascinating to look at.
By the way, my background's from Martin's Beach.
Oh.
The infamous Martin's Beach.
Yes. Yes.
And in San Mateo County, and I hope during the holiday time to get to visit it. Through the one access point that is semi-open. So
yeah, we could talk about that too.
So anyway, speaking of holiday time, early holiday wishes, and we'll do more over newsletters and the internets. But once again, Chris, thank you very much for coming on.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.